Alright, greetings all, this is Max, and today we are going to be talking about Uniformitarianism. What is that? What is Uniformitarianism? Well, when you look it up, you only come up with some kind of word that Christians apparently use to denounce the millions of years theory, and because it has something to do with a Christian, or the dreaded creationist, that therefore it must be cuckoo or crazy. Well, let's take a little bit deeper look here. Uniformitarianism is basically saying that because we see it happen now, we're going to assume that it happened millions of years ago, and all the environment and all of everything has stayed the same in all that time. To put it, I used the instance of the Grand Canyon. They say the Colorado River carved that because they take the known rate of erosion, whatever that may be, and then they say, well, because it erodes X amount of centimeters every year, we can say that it took this many years to equate the mile or something that it is. The Grand Canyon is something like a mile deep. They say that okay, well, we can explain that through erosion over millions of years, and I just want to point out some of the flawed thinking there. Now, I'm going to start with this scenario where let's say you want to figure out the temperature. Okay, this is what I'm going to use uniformitarian thinking here. It's like saying that the temp is 75 degrees at noon, right? And then that's what the temperature was today. And now I'm going to say that every day at noon it's going to be 75 degrees. And we'll extrapolate that back millions of years then. Just, and people are going to say that that's crazy, and you're not taking into account all this other stuff, and uniformitarianism is based on scientific fact, this and that. And it's like, well, if it's 75 degrees outside, it's a fact, right? I take the time at noon. This is the time that I'm taking it, 75 degrees, and that's going to be my fact. Now, I don't know what the temperature was yesterday, but I'm going to assume it was 75 degrees at noon. Or in the biggest example, and let me point out that the flaws that they're pointing out in that thinking is 100% correct. I'm making a lot of assumptions is what they'll say, and I'll say, yep, that's exactly right, but that's uniformitarian thinking. And you can take any time scale you want. We'll take the time scale of the entire known history of man, right? And we'll take the average temperature. Well, we're just going to assume that it's always been that temperature at that time because the average temperature equated it so, right? And then once you make that jump to where you're no longer recording history, all of a sudden that's the default de facto temperature. Nothing would have ever changed. As soon as it's outside the eye where you see something change, it goes to long ago and far away where you can make up whatever you want to. And this holds true. This is where carbon dating, radiometric dating, and all of them fail, because even though the method itself is incredibly precise, you can measure the decay of something, right down to it is reasonably accurate, provided they know all the environmental variables. But that is also assuming that the world has stayed the same for millions and millions of years, whatever date you happen to come up with. This is also where the second law of thermodynamics comes in a little bit, because people will contend that life and the earth is an open system because of the sun and this and that, and well, maybe so on a short time scale. I would argue that no, it's never an open system. But if you look at a day and you say, well, see, the guy didn't die because he ate dinner and had a glass of water. Well, if you go over the course of 1,000 years, there isn't anything that's lived that long. So what do you got there? I mean, some trees do. I think the oldest tree is 4,300 years old or something like that. But even it's going to die. And according to the hypothesis there that the earth and life gets energy from the sun, well, plants get energy from the sun and they die. So this is the same thing where on a short enough time scale, sure, you can consider things uniformitarian or open systems in case of a second law of thermodynamics. But then as soon as you leave anything observable, you're jumping off into fantasy land. And they'll say that, they have evidence with multiple sources or whatever confirming their reasoning behind why they think something is so old, but it is the same old thing. When you look at it, we're going to extract the data that we have from today or recorded history, and we'll just apply that to all the stuff that we don't know about. And, it's wishful thinking science. That's what I like to call it. It's wishful thinking science. Uniformitarianism is valid if you're using it during a time period that's observable or immediately thereafter. In geology, I could see, uniformitarianism, 10,000 years, sure. I don't have a problem with that at all. But 10,000 years, even 50,000 years, I would even go for that. But millions of years? That's 1,000 years times 1,000 years, right? I mean, that is silliness. Absolute silliness to expect that the conditions have not changed, regardless of what you're dealing with. Especially when you're talking about carbon dating, which relies on the atmosphere to a great deal. I think a lot of these other radiometric dating methods do as well, and what the conditions of the atmosphere are like. And we know as fact the atmosphere was completely different not that long ago. There was a much higher oxygen content and a much higher pressure. We have fossilized critters that are huge that prove it. Dinosaurs couldn't live today. The giant insects fossils that we have couldn't live today. So we know that the atmosphere was radically different. And how is that going to affect your radiometric dating and your uniformitarian ideas? It's going to affect it a lot. And it boggles my mind that people don't see this because we're taught in schools logic to a small degree, a very small degree. But everybody remembers back in school, you'll have a question of logic where you've got, say, men and women like pets. This is the question. Men and women like pets. All women like cats. Jan is a woman, therefore she's a lesbian, or whatever the question is. You know where I'm going with the question. Those are on SATs and all this stuff, and it's a question of logic as how you can relate to everything. And this is how uniformitarianism work. It completely ignores the whole logic aspect of it. And it boggles my mind how people would say that that's some kind of a proof for something. It isn't. In the end of the day, Jan the woman ends up being a lesbian. It's not logical in the form of the question. Now, with all this, I'm not trying to prove that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. I think that is going to be silly to try to do that. The Bible suggests that it could be only 6,000 years old. I don't know. I haven't really studied that far into it to say that it is 6,000 years old. I do know that it was created. You can tell that by several scientific discoveries, that it certainly can't be millions of years old, and that it had an obvious beginning. I mean, if it wasn't created, where does time come from? Where does gravity come from? Do these things just evolve themselves? That to me seems preposterous, right? And there are things that would suggest a younger Earth, like a created young Earth, like radiopolonium halos, which the scientists say is not real good science, because guess what? They point out the flaws in the assumptions made by the radiopolonium halos, which is what? They're criticizing the uniformitarian method that was used to get the results that they got. And this was a study where halos are formed in granite, which is considered a primordial rock, one of the first rocks created or something to that effect. But there's radiometric halos that are created that can only be created if the rock is created quickly, more or less to that effect. But they're making a lot of assumptions in there. I'll agree with that. But that's uniformitarianism. So it's like, if we're trying to back what we're trying to prove over in mainstream science, then uniformitarianism is the way that it's done. But if you use the same logic to discredit something that they're doing, or you come up with a different result, then, uniformitarianism isn't based on science and observable fact. So it's like you got the cake and then you want to eat everything in the bakehouse with this theory. That's just the way that I see it. Another example of where they use uniformitarianism to their own benefit and then ignore any of the obvious problems is it's okay to use uniformitarianism to decide that the comets can only live to be something like 50,000 years, or I don't even think it's that long. I think it's like 10,000 years maybe, is supposed to be the lifespan of a comet, because they know the comets are made of ice. And they go, as they fly around the sun, they can tell how much ice that they lose. So they come to the conclusion with uniformitarian thinking, gee, the comets can't be that old. So what do then? They invent a fantasy long ago and far away, Oort cloud, Kuiper belt thing, that apparently births these comets for no apparent reason and sends them flying around the galaxy for us to look at. That's kind of flawed logic there. Just kind of inventing something. There's absolutely no proof whatsoever, but they assume it must exist, right? Because we have comets today and everybody knows the Earth is millions of years old. So there's some problems here. And again, they'll point to, when you bring up this fact, they'll say, well, you don't know where the comets are coming from, and you don't know what's going on with them, and all this and that. And I go, well, yeah, but it's your uniformitarian. If you go back to your own science that you guys use and show something that doesn't jive with millions of years old, then we'll just throw that theory out, and it can't, whatever. We won't talk about it in this instance, but everywhere else, you want to talk about the Grand Canyon. Well, that's erosion. It doesn't add up. So when people talk about uniformitarianism, this is what they're talking about. It's a completely flawed, long ago and far away argument that if you try to use it in a sense where someone can actually observe what's happening, then it doesn't fit. It almost never fits. So in the end, what you're left with is a theory that, seems like it, would work, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal until you realize that they're taking into, I don't think people really understand the concept of millions of years. They really don't. I just think of how much has changed in the last 4,000 years of recorded history. I mean, things are completely different than what they were 4,000 years ago. And not just in what humans are doing, in the world in general. There's been a lot of things changing. So uniformitarianism, the concept, is a concept, and you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. It's okay. It's somewhat more scientific than a guess, a complete outright guess. It's a basis to start with, but it's totally not without its problems. And it's very much like saying it's been 75 degrees today at noon. Therefore, it must have always been 75 degrees at noon. Therefore, tomorrow will be 75 degrees at noon. It's the same thing. And you can try and rationalize it all you want to, but it's always going to come down to that same scenario. It always is. Because you don't know what you don't know. And it's faith. And I don't have a problem with scientists saying, or whatever publication, scientists never really say anything. It's always some mystery, unnamed group of people. But I have no problem with reading a publication and it saying scientists believe the Earth is millions of years old, based on X, Y, and Z. People believe this, believe that. Their studies show. That's fine with me. But it's never shown that way. It's always, this is a fact, and if you don't believe it, you're stupid. And this is where all these arguments in the comments come from. When anytime there's an evolution kind of debate thing going, it always comes down to people copying, pasting crap that they, their science book told them that it was fact. And it's not fact. It can't be fact. It's long ago and far away. You don't know what happened there. You can say this is what you think happened. I have no problems with that. But you can't say proof for the Grand Canyon, the Colorado River being eroding the Grand Canyon is based in uniformitarianism and call that fact. It's BS. absolute BS. Okay? And the reason that this is such a big deal to me is if you don't present things in the true light that they are, that they actually exist in, and you present things as fact that are unprovable, you're totally misleading people, completely misleading people into coming up with conclusions that just aren't true. They're not true. Nobody knows millions of years, nothing. They don't know any of that crap. But they're going to say that it's true. They're going to say that it's proof. Oh, we got the geologic column. Well, who came up with that? Some guy in the 1800s. Oh, it looks like those are different layers, so they must be millions of years. Where do you get that? They didn't have anything to test those rocks back then. Where does that come from? It's a guy's guess. And there's no problem with saying you think it is, but it's always taught as fact. And when you go into this realm of long ago and far away, they know what happens in people's minds as they can't conceptualize that. And as long as you give them an answer of long ago and far away, how it happened, how they say it happened as a fact, right? Then it's up to the person's own imagination to make those links actually work and make sense in your own brain. Now, this is known psychology, people. This isn't Fantasyland stuff. This is demonstratable test, and this is things that they teach salespeople to do, is how to hypnotize people into making the links in their own mind, and then you don't have to explain anything other than say, well, everyone agrees, so it's got to be true. And then it's up to you to rationalize it in your own mind. And when people don't do that, then you call them out as being crazy Christian fundamentalist nut jobs. And the technical term for anyone who wants to look into this and research it is covert hypnosis, mind control. But you're going to get all kinds of crap with mind control. The things that they teach salespeople is covert hypnosis or hypnotic suggestion. Anytime you turn on the television, there's an example of hypnotic suggestion. Covert hypnosis, anytime you want to watch a television commercial. Just think how good this product would make you feel. You know, it's putting you, it's doing a hypnotic suggestion for you to buy a product. And for those people that disagree with, you know, the world of television being nothing but hypnotic suggestion, I want you to watch a commercial and really look at what they're saying. And they're really not selling you a product. They're making you imagine how nice it would feel to own the product. Okay, that's what they do. Make you imagine something. This is the exact same thing. Anytime anyone goes millions of years ago, they want you to imagine something. They want you to imagine what it would be like and to make those connections in your mind. It's not based on science, though, people. It's not science. Okay, so that's about all the time I want to spend on it. I just wanted to do this quick thing to actually kind of define what uniformitarianism is for people so that they don't get misconstrued or confused that it's anything to do with fact. It's extrapolation and interpolation based on things that you might see happening right now. So it's an educated guess. Sorta. Anyways, this has been Max. We'll see you next time.